I've been teaching for 11 years in schools in London. First of all at a girls' school, 11 to 18. Very little IT, virtually nothing at all in the school. I moved on to a boys' school 4 years ago when I became the head of department. And things have begun to improve, certainly in terms of IT so far now. So now I have an interactive whiteboard in my own classroom. The fact that students are becoming much more independent learners. And again, I quote, the internet enables students to develop as independent, effective, efficient and discerning electronic information gatherers rather than remain as, and I like this bit, serendipitous and credulous surfer browsers. I don't exactly understand what it means, but it does sound quite good to me. And this is where I got my title of this paper. Just having that knowledge, as we know, is not learning. Okay? Just having that information in front of you is not enough. Now, that's fairly apparent if you take a class into the computer rooms and they're using the internet. They're not that skilled as maybe some of us are, but they get lost on the superhighway. It is so easy for the kids just to, tap something in, get completely taken off on tangents all over the place. But I think for most of us the concern is the passive learning which takes place. That it's just information just going in, it's not being processed, and as a result it's not deep learning, it's not being registered effectively. WebQuest, an online lesson or series of lessons using the internet as a resource for guided research, and I think that whole question of guided research is the crucial element in all of this. And when you're using a WebQuest, you follow a particular structure. So the introduction is the initial hook, the stimulus, which is going to get the pupils engaged in the piece of work. So you can do that in a variety of ways. You can have real-life situations. So, for example, I've seen a WebQuest on the Amistad slave ship, which is talking about the actual case involved. Or you can have a sort of fantasy scenario. Now, the second page is the task, and here you can be as creative as possible. You can think about ending up with a whole class debate on a topic. You can have multimedia presentations, you can have a simple written description, you can do a booklet, a poster, and so on. The possibilities are endless. But the task needs to have a realistic and achievable outcome, because that is something which they can take away from the end of that's their product at the end. Then the process. So students are working through a step-by-step process as they work through the WebQuest. And this can either be done individually or as a whole group or in small groups. And having both of those options is another very important part of that learning process, because you get those individual skills, the IT skills, the presentation skills, you get the group work, the communication skills, all of those working in together. The next section is the resources page. Now obviously the resource that you're going to be using is the World Wide Web. But the crucial point of this is that students are not drifting off into hyperspace, but you are very clearly directing them to the websites that you have as a teacher pre-selected. The next section is about evaluation. And this is very, very important in any piece of work that you're doing. Students need to know what is expected of them. They need to have a clear idea of the mark scheme. They need to have a clear idea of what they can do to improve the work that they're doing, the critical steps, if you like, to make further progress. And finally, the conclusion, which allows you to sum up, but also allows you to take the students further on into the piece of work that you're doing. So you give them further areas of stimulus. But another very, very important thing about web quests is that this idea of using higher order thinking skills, so that pupils are not just reading, comprehending, understanding the information, but they have to actually synthesize material from different sources. You've put in forms of analysis so that they have to make judgments or discussions of particular points, and they have to evaluate what they're doing. And this is, using Bloom's taxonomy, higher order thinking skills. So the task, I very specifically chose this task because I wanted them to write a booklet for primary school students, because that was the thing which was going to force them to process the material. The next page are the resources. Now here I've tried to differentiate, because what I've done on the first page here is I've tried to narrow down the number of resources that they're going to be using. So I've tried to keep it to what I consider to be the key 3 sites for Caribbean, for Indian and for African soldiers. But if I wanted to pitch it up at a higher level, and I wanted to get some of the more able pupils in, then you just have a hyperlink to a second resources page which has got, up to 20 or so different pages. Now the assessment page just gave a very simple mark scheme. 1 point for using one website, 2 for 2 websites, 3 for 3 or more websites. And that was a very specific reason for that as well. I didn't want them going off using 15 different websites. So I'm not going to credit them if they've gone off and used that many. I wanted them to stay focused. The assumption is that students these days now have much better ICT skills than they ever had before. But some of the stuff which I was getting was not brilliant. Some of them even did it in Word. Just really boring and basic. And some of the lower ability students in particular found it too daunting. It was too much for them. And the words that they used to describe it, it's too long, sir, which you get all the time. But there are positive things. One of the best booklets, and I've bought a copy here, was done by a dyslexic pupil. And he really got into this. He really thought carefully about what information he wanted to use. He presented it really nicely. I was really pleased with that. Yeah, they were getting a lot more information than they would have done off a normal worksheet, basically. In terms of what I would have changed, I think maybe, I need to look again at the resources and see if I've got more appropriate ones. I think also what I would have done is put in some ICT criteria in the assessment page as well, and just sort of judge some of those skills as well.
Well, on the forum I suggested about whether they should have been analysing teaching materials beforehand.
Yes.
To see what they
Yes.
like about, maybe that gives them some idea about how they should produce it.
Yeah, I think so. I think, going sort of fresh into this is probably quite a daunting thing for Year 9 students to do. But I think, if you've had a lesson or so building up to it beforehand where you do say, what does make an effective booklet, or what does make an effective poster, or whatever, and you model various examples, that's probably the way I would do it again next time, I think. So I said, Lucas, what are you doing? He said, I'm just copying loads of information. I said, well, why are you doing that? He said, well, I'm just going to copy all the time until someone catches me and does me for copyright. And that was it. So, you're never going to win.